Hi, John.
Good morning, RL. Good morning, everybody. Yes, we were actually talking about food before service.
What's new?
I know. So I came up with your next icebreaker for your next Zoom call. So what's one food that your family absolutely has to have at your dinner table on normal Thanksgivings that you would be actually appalled if it showed up on the table any other time of year? Think of it. we all have those. A little something to think about. So I have been reading a book called Everything is Spiritual: Who We Are and What We're Doing Here by Rob Bell, who is a minister and has gone on to many great things. And I just love this title, though. Who We Are and What We're Doing Here. I mean, hasn't that crossed your mind these last few months? Like, what are we doing here? How did this happen? What are we supposed to learn from this? Who are we anyway? Who are we supposed to be? Who will we become through this all? And just this, we've been invited to an inner dialogue, especially when we've had periods that we were truly locked down. And even if we weren't officially locked down, knowing that we needed to keep more to ourselves, we've been asking ourselves these questions. And in fact, I think this is probably the point, universal point of everything that's going on right now, for us to ask this question: who are we? Why are we here? What are we doing? Why is this all happening? And he tells a compelling story of his life, and I haven't finished maybe half of it. For those who don't know who Rob Bell is, he was a minister of what we call a megachurch in the Christian world, meaning thousands and thousands of members. These phenomena that just emerge for who knows how or why, and feeling that he was called to be in ministry and do many things, and then coming to the inner realization that it wasn't just feeling right anymore, at least the physical aspect of what he was doing, that he just felt he was being pushed to do something else. And he would ask himself, wait a second, but we have this great thing that's happening, and look at people that are saying that we're being served and really having transformations, but yet it's feeling like he wasn't quite exactly in the right place. And it's interesting how two things can happen. We can feel negative things are happening, and why am I here? And great things are happening, and why am I here? So the question always is, regardless of how it looks on the outside, why am I here? What are the questions that we need to ask? And actually, he's kind of moved on, that he's now teamed up with Oprah doing films and things. And I think, oh, well, that's an upgrade a little bit, isn't it? So we're asking those questions right now. And as I was reading this, there's a story that came to mind, and I wrote a bit about it on my blog, and I'll tell a little bit more, in detail today, that just so reminded me where we are right now, at least to me. See if you can get that interpretation. So in the late 90s, I had a job. I've had a job forever, it seems like, in one way or another. But I had a job as I was going to the School of Ministry. And I met this guy and got to be friendly. And he shared with me that he was, as we say, living with HIV. Meaning, even today, there still is no cure for it, but people are able to live with it. There's been medical advances that, just like diabetes, you can not necessarily cure it, but you can live with it. You can medicate with it. You can have a full, normal life with it. But this was kind of a newer type thing in the late 90s. And he shared with me that just about 2 or 3 years before, he had had full-blown AIDS. And he had just retreated to home and basically ready to pass. That he was experiencing the symptoms that unfortunately so many people did during that time, and he basically was just preparing to die. And then something kind of amazing happened medically during that time. Medicine developed what they call these drug cocktails. And you think of it like a mad scientist putting cocktails together. But basically there was all these different drugs that could inhibit the viral growth and you needed for each patient to find just the right mix. The right mix that it would be effective with the least amount of physical things happening that you didn't want to have happen. And some people actually couldn't take them at that time because their reactions were so extreme. So it was just working with your doctor to get something that the side effects would be minimal and the virus would be suppressed. And so he said, his doctor says, oh, we have these new cocktails happening. Kind of interesting way to get you to do a medicine. I've got a cocktail for you. Oh, okay, that sounds good. Different kind of cocktail. And he says, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And there had been a couple other things that came along that were to combat that virus, but it gave you a little bit more time. It never really got you to the point that you felt like you had some sort of relief from it. So he says, yeah, I'll start taking it. And they found one that worked well for him. And he was still, thinking that he was going to die. But he said, oddly enough, he started to feel better. Oddly enough, he started to put on weight. I mean, he had, like so many people during that time, you start to just go within yourself. In fact, at the time that I knew him, he had a little extra around the belly. He says, I'm so proud of this belly here. He says, before, I was just going into myself, so I feel good about that. And he said he was just kind of surprised that he was getting better. And then one morning he woke up and had this odd realization. He said, I guess I need to find a job. He had structured his life and financial life to the fact that he would only have a few months around, and realized that he couldn't be on the financial path that he was now, knowing that it didn't look like he was going to go anytime soon. So as I was having this discussion with him, and of course this was over multiple times, it wasn't like he just told me all at lunch one day, said it really was like a rebirth of sorts. That as he came out of this, of course, the world had changed, and he had changed. And there was no going back to, in a sense, to just say, well, that was an interesting interlude. Let's go back 5 years and just start where I left off. It was this realization that he was given this amazing opportunity to really rethink his life, ask himself the questions, who am I and what am I doing here? And actually told me, he said it was almost like he felt like he was a high school senior again, graduating, thinking that you have this full life ahead of you with no clue what it is and what you're supposed to do with it. And that he was really clear that he needed to be really mindful about making those decisions. That again, he was just given this opportunity, this really gift, to just not be asleep again. To fully be awake and say, what am I doing? Who am I? What am I doing? What contribution can I give to the world? How can I show up as my authentic self? I mean, all those questions that I think many of us ask, but I think we don't ask them as deeply as someone who has recovered like someone like he did. That you get so close to passing that when you come back that you go, oh, I really need to ask these questions. So the reason why I believe I thought about him this week, and I haven't thought about him for quite some time, is looking where we are in the world right now and some of the parallels to that period of time with the AIDS virus. So we have a pandemic right now. Just like the AIDS virus in the 80s and 90s, so much misinformation. So much really odd information, really conspiracy theories and scapegoating and all these weird things happening with it that I think really shouldn't have to happen. And we've been really required to drastically change how we're living. And we don't want to have to drastically change the way we've been living, but we've had to. But right now, this last week, as I'm sure most of you know, there's this little hope on the horizon with the possibilities of what appears to be two vaccines that could very well be quite effective. And and even though there's so much more we need to know about that, just the idea kind of makes you think, could life go back to normal again? And if you talk to some of the medical experts, are saying, actually, over a period of time. By next Thanksgiving, we might be at our dinner tables with our families, eating all that food we would never eat any other time of the year, together again, and not just doing it on Zoom. So there's that kind of like that little bit of hope of, God, this actually could be. But at the same time, it looks like we're going to have a few months still that are potentially pretty rough, with infections and people getting sick and dying before we get to that place. And in some way, I don't know if the prospect of vaccines and horizons makes it better or worse. You know, just, I don't know, does it make us more antsy, more, not wanting to stick with what we know that we need to do right now? And I almost think of it as when I was in grade school, and we would break for summer in like June 14th or something. And by May, you were just like antsy in your desk. You know, you're looking out the window. It's like, can I leave yet? Can I leave yet? But yet, those last few weeks were often the most important time of the school year. You finished things up. You had your finals. You said goodbye to whatever grade that was before you could move forward. So I think we're in an odd spot. So the question is, what are you going to do with it? Because, just like with my friend, let's imagine ourselves at some great moment that let's months from now, say, I really don't have to wear a mask. I mean, really. I know some people think you don't, but really don't have to. And to think, there really isn't a problem going into a restaurant and being there with a packed house. There'll be those days. But what are we going to do now to prepare ourselves to walk out into a different world? Because again, just like my friend, there's no going back. There's a reason I believe all this has happened, and larger metaphysical reasons that I couldn't even begin to guess. But it's forced us to relook at ourselves. So what are you going to do in these last, let's say, few months or year? Just like those last few weeks of each grade in grade school before you popped out for summer vacation. What are you going to do with it? What's going to be your project? Or are you up to having an inner project right now? And I think the more of us that are willing to do it, the more quickly and more easily we'll get through this. So in my class that I've been facilitating, we've been focusing on spiritual principles. And I've been asking my students through this 5-week class, what principle do you want to make your project? And I talked a little bit about this last week. What do you want to invite in your life? What do you want to just let wash over you and change you and transform you from the inside out? And in doing so, how can that prepare you to walk into this new world that we've created as we get on the other side of this pandemic? Because it's just not about the pandemic. So many things are shifting and changing. How are you opening to be different? So just like last week, I attached a list of spiritual principles that you might ask yourself, is this my project? Let me just read them. Oneness, love, creative process, freedom, heaven, honesty, generosity, confidence, courage, and authenticity. How can any of those change your life? And just tell me how this can work for you and how it has worked for me and how this has actually worked for me unconsciously. It's just been, in many ways, the last few years that I've really understood how you can consciously take on a principle in your life and have it change you. But as I was looking at this list and thinking, well, what is my project right now? But I realized there's one that has been my life project. And I actually wasn't that aware of it. This last couple of weeks, I became aware of it. And the last one here, the principle of authenticity. And what does that mean? To be willing to show up doing what is authentically yours in the world. And I don't mean necessarily on a level of ego, like I have to have a certain type of career or something. It's to show up to do what you came here to do. And allow yourself to be open to that, even if you think what you're doing is quite fine. And this is how it's really has worked for me. I've had this idea of doing what I'm really supposed to be doing here, is that I might be doing something really great, or at least I think it's pretty great. And when it's time to shift in my authenticity, where I am at that moment starts to feel like I'm in foreign territory. Like a place I'm living suddenly doesn't feel like my home anymore. A place that I've been showing up for work, as great as it is, doesn't feel like the place I should be showing up for work anymore. And it's not just about changing the pieces on the chessboard. It's about like opening up to something different or the next step. And I have found that this is also how this process works, that if you're willing to be open to that and take any one of these principles of your project right now, and I would say just print it out because it's attached to the live stream event, and just spend some quiet time with one. And I love, what did you say for the spiritual storm or spiritual quietness that you said from? Something like that.
Holy wind in your soul?
Yeah, holy wind in your soul. I love that. So, I know, I put Alex on the spot. So think of it like you spend time with some of this and like a holy wind in your soul, like really be open to what this could be for you. And you just even think of when we have windy fall days and the leaves are on the ground and how that wind just blows everything around and seemingly makes a mess, but it's just rearranging things in a different way that's perfect. So what happens is that when you, in a sense, commit to something like that, from that you can start to set an intention with it. And again, not intentions about a particular thing or having a certain thing or doing a certain thing, but your intention, which is just the realization and understanding that this is your project for right now. And in setting that intention, start to be awake and notice how your outside life starts to shift. So it's almost like a new paths start to open that you can go down those paths. And maybe you can't seemingly walk some of those paths right now, but just be open to them. Because from words from another teacher of mine several years ago, and I've used this occasionally, I've brought this up, that this is a time, as in all times, as we go to prayer or spiritual practice, and realize it's not so much what your ego says you should pray for, but it's always, what are you praying from? What is your true intention in here? How are you making yourself available in a way you may not have made yourself available for? Because here's what I found about prayer, is that when you pray for something, you may or may not have that happen in your life. And I don't know why. But when you pray from something, it always changes your life. It always changes who you are and how you show up. It always changes the atmosphere that you enter in every room that you enter. That it is the way of truly, truly making amazing things happen in your life when you ask, what is my motivation? What is that point that I'm praying from, in a sense? And here's an amazing thing and a point from Rob Bell that you start to realize. So when we are in this crazy world right now, of course, we all have our hopes and dreams, and we all have an idea of, in a sense, what we should pray for, and we have different opinions about that. But wouldn't it be amazing that we are all on the same aspect of what we're praying from? In other words, the best and highest good for all things. And here's one thing that you start to realize. As he makes a point here, as in this book, he says everything is spiritual. And he says everything. Even the things in the categories that we don't like. The people that we're annoyed with. Everything is spiritual. And if you follow this path of a project, of a spiritual principle, you start to realize that. I loved what he said here. He says, there is no word for spiritual in the Hebrew Scriptures, meaning what we call the Old Testament. So basic and yet so revolutionary. There's no word for spiritual because to call something spiritual would be to imply that other things aren't. In the Bible, everything is spiritual, all of life. It's never just a job. You're never just a mom or just a dad. It's never just money. It's never just your body. Nothing exists in isolation. It's all connected. Everything is spiritual. So in your personal project, how might you be part of unveiling that concept in the world? That even when you see someone or something on TV that just gets you going, that you could say, yes, I don't agree with that, but nothing is separate. Everything is spiritual, including that. And that I'm going to own my connection to that, even if it in some way just I find abhorrent. It's still spiritual on some level. So I think that as we, come out of our homes sometime in the next few months in a post-virus world, in a world that there are vaccines, that we're going to have to come more face-to-face with that which we don't want to think is spiritual. And I think our job right now and our project in having a spiritual principle to work with is to prepare us for that moment when that time comes. And amazing things can happen when we do. And I just want to close today with another quote from Everything Spiritual. And he talks about, ultimately following that inner calling that he's been led to. He says, I didn't know that my life could go this way, that it could be more compelling, more meaningful, more mysterious, more surprising, more fascinating year after year. It's like an endless invitation, this experience that we're having here. And we can say yes and over and over and over again. And when we do, it opens up new depths, new connections, and new possibilities we never could have imagined before. So let's just take this within right now. And just ask your inner self, what's my project right now? As we finish this time in history over the next few months, what's your project? Is it love? Is it connection? Is it bringing heaven to earth? Is it the understanding of choice? Is it forgiveness? Is it oneness? Is it authenticity? What's yours to do right now? And in the time that we have, these next weeks and months, know that that concept, that idea exists within you at the cellular level. It is your motivation. It is the way that you will serve and continue to serve. It's the gift that you give to the world. It's how you will see the Spirit and the divine in everything. And I claim and affirm for each person here today that they are open to that concept, that they see it as one of the truths of their being, and they share it with all. And as we do so, we give thanks. And as we give thanks, we simply just let it go. Release it into the universe, into the heart and mind of Spirit, and let it be. And so it is.